This is the Mosh Pit Backstage podcast for punk, metal and rock interviews and segments.
Hi, this is Greg from Paradise Lost and you're listening to Mosh Pit on Sin.
Greg Makintosh is a guitarist from English metal band Paradise Lost, who are releasing their 15th album, Medusa, on the 1st of September. They will also be touring Australia in December, playing in Melbourne at the Corner Hotel on the 16th. Greg, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
I feel like this is your heaviest album in a number of years. Talk a little bit about the sound of this album.
I would probably say it's our heaviest album to date, really, partly because of the way the songs are written, but also partly because of the production. The production is very kind of a bit of a throwback production in a way, and also very organic. I mean, it's basically the mics in the room recording everything, no editing, no nothing. And it's very much a doom metal album. You know, I mean, we had a very clear idea of what we were doing before we even started writing this album, which we don't normally have. Normally we just start writing and see what happens. But with this record, we had a very clear idea we wanted to do a doom metal album. And it just worked that way. I mean, the first song on the album is 8.5 minutes long, and our label, when we told them we wanted to put that first, they were kind of a little apprehensive, because it's kind of throwing people in at the deep end. But and it's not as immediate as maybe some of the previous albums, but I think it's a grower, and that's the whole point to me, you know. But yeah, it's very heavy, very doom metal. It can be quite eclectic in parts, and there's a range of vocal styles and a range of different musical styles on there.
How did you go about writing an album? You mentioned you had an idea of what you wanted to make. Did that affect the way you write in any way?
Oh yeah, a little bit, because you have, in my head, I had a brief. I had something that I really wanted to achieve with it, so that does affect the style, the writing style a little bit. But we completely changed our songwriting style. We started to do it on the last record, and it was a successful way of songwriting. So we applied it to this record in its entirety, which is. The idea came to me from David Bowie. I don't know if you know how he used to write his lyrics, but he used to write the words down, various words that he liked, snip them up into pieces and throw them on the floor. And I thought it would be a cool idea to try something similar, but in an audio way. So I would send Nick, our vocalist, a couple of riffs and just say, can you sing as many different vocal lines as possible over this? You know, gruff vocals, clean vocals, harmonies, various different melodies. And send them back to me, and then I'd completely strip everything apart and build it like a jigsaw from scratch. And it became a really intuitive and fast way of writing. Instead of having one version of a song that you're working on over and over to try and get to the best possible version, you can have like 10, 15 versions of the same song at any one time and try out lots of different things really fast. So this album only took like 6 months to write, and we usually take a year. So I think I'm going to carry on with this songwriting style, because it just made everything so intuitive, you know, and it really felt like you had a grasp on everything at one time.
In terms of you writing, like before you've got the riff down, sending it to Nick, he sends you stuff back and you start mixing and matching. How do you come up with the riffs? What's your process for that?
Well, it doesn't. The couple of riffs that I come up with to send him in the first place don't necessarily have to be in the song in the final product, if you know what I mean. It's just kind of I send him a couple of riffs where I'm just trying to spark his imagination, and get something out of him that I have an idea about. So usually it's just a little chord progression at first, and when I'm building the song, that's when the riffs come into play. And usually they're inspired by lots of different things, but usually like a lot of the early doom metal stuff and early Gothic stuff mixed with stuff that I've found recently. You know, I mean, I'm a great sort of Bandcamp trawler. I love looking through bands on Bandcamp and finding new bands and then really raving about them and stuff and boring people about them. Because I just think it's the best thing that's happened to music since the dawn of the internet for me, Bandcamp, because it's something where the bands have full control over what they do. And it's great for me as a listener to find things that are trailblazing. Because in mainstream metal, things seem to have stagnated a lot. So when you look into the underground, that's where the real trailblazers are, I think.
Now, you mentioned a lot of different stuff going into the album. One thing that I noticed in particular was Passage for the Dead. It kind of had a really old school feel about it. It had those kind of unnerving guitar melodies that you find in the early sort of death metal, doom metal crossover stuff. How did that song in particular come about?
It's interesting because some people have said certain songs sound like this and certain songs like that, and it's not necessarily what I had in mind, but I think every point is valid. With No Passage for the Dead, it came about, at first it was just the initial riff that you hear when the song comes in, that I just thought was a really cool, slow, like early Sabbath meets death metal type riff. And then it kind of expanded on it with this melody line, that the guitar that comes over the top, the Fifth Harmony melody guitar, that's more like something from a classic rock era, almost Thin Lizzy-esque over the top of it. And I liked the dissonance of that. And like you say, I think it makes it more unnerving because it's something that you don't necessarily expect coming in over a riff like that. So yeah, I like to do things like that. I like to try out lots of different things over the top of riffs to try and spark some kind of dissonant imagination there. I mean, the songs to me and bands, when I listen to them, it's all about what the song makes you picture in your head and what it makes you feel. And even more so than actually the riffs sometimes, it's about the dynamics of the songs and just where it takes you in your head. So yeah, I'm a big one for escapism within songs like that.
For this album, as with Plague Within, there's a noticeable sort of prominence of the harsh vocals. You mentioned trying up lots of different stuff. But in terms of that kind of resurging to prominence in the last album and this record, was that motivated by, hey, we really want to bring that back, or did it fit the music? Or how did that kind of, let's include more of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it was almost accidental, really. I mean, I was pushing, for a few years ago, I was pushing Nick to try some of that vocal style out again, and he really wasn't interested in doing it. But then, when we started this kind of songwriting that we do now, it gave me kind of the impetus to be able to try it for him, if you know what I mean. He would just give me little passages, and then if I could make it fit really well to whatever I was doing, then he'd have to kind of then say, yeah, you're right, this is really working. So I wasn't really pushing for it. It was just, I like to have that at my disposal, if you know what I mean. If a part demands something like that, then you already have it there and you can use it in your palette. So, and I think it's just the way that this album went. It just became heavier and heavier as we were writing it, and just the gruff vocals were the thing that was working most on a lot of the passages. You
released your other band, Valenfire?
Valenfire, yeah.
Valenfire. They released an album in June. That's kind of interesting because you've got two bands which it'd be silly to say, oh, they're the same because they're death metal, doom metal. But in certain ways, there's definitely a similarity. How do those two processes, writing, recording, interact, and how do you kind of keep the ideas for bands separate?
It was definitely more challenging this time because I only wrote, I mean, this is the third Valenfire album, and the last actually, but it's the first time I've actually had to write back to back with Paradise Lost. Usually I started to write this third record because I thought I had a bit of time off from Paradise Lost. But then Paradise Lost signed to Nuclear Blast, and Nuclear Blast wanted an album. So I ended up doing them kind of simultaneously. So yeah, it was a challenge, but I think I have a very clear view in mind of the different vibe that each band gives me. I see Paradise Lost as more the refined adult side of me, and Valenfire as the chaotic kind of child in me. So it's kind of more about the vibe. You know, when I come up with a riff or a part while I was writing these two records, I just applied them as to how they made me feel. You know, if it was very angry and chaotic and unhinged or very, very dissonant, then it was a Valenfire riff. And if it was more melodic and more refined, it was a Paradise Lost riff. So it kind of helped me in a way, because when I got kind of bogged down in writing a Paradise Lost song and I needed some kind of respite, I would go and write a Valenfire song and vice versa. So it kind of did help in a way. Roundabout way, anyway.
What's particularly striking about the album is the cover. It's great. It totally suits the music. Very kind of doomy, kind of classic doom in a certain way. But if you don't mind me saying, it kind of it strikes me as very different to previous Paradise Lost covers. How did that album cover come about?
Well, we when we were thinking about an album cover, we myself and Nick, we looked at all the album covers on one page that we've had over the years, and I'm kind of fairly proud that every record cover is completely different in style and execution. And we kind of wanted to do the same with the new one. We knew we wanted a colourful cover. We knew we wanted it some kind of retro styling, but we also wanted it to have some kind of classic PL elements. So we approached a place called Branca Studios in Spain, and we just went through a few different ideas with them. Obviously, with a title like Medusa, you're instantly kind of picturing one thing. But we really wanted to avoid the head of snakes, if you know what I mean. We wanted snakes to be involved, but not the head of snakes. And Branca are really good at that. Branca Studios are really good at that kind of retro styling, but it had to be this classic kind of PL vibe to it. So yeah, we toured and froed a little bit until we came up with what we thought was the cover. I mean, what we gave them as a brief was something like the Born Again cover by Black Sabbath. I mean, because it's a fairly terrible cover, Born Again, but it's very, very iconic and very eye-catching. And so we wanted something that was, if you passed a poster of it in the street, it would immediately catch your eye, but it had to be something good as well, not like the Born Again cover. So yeah, it was that was the brief we gave them anyway. And like I say, after a bit of to and fro, and we got there in the end.
You've talked about in the past that you're not just trying to push the envelope for its own sake. Creatively, there's been a definite sort of trajectory moving along. No album's the same in a good way. What is it that causes you to not be satisfied with kind of like saying, "Oh, we'll make some songs in the same style as the previous album"? Is it boredom? Is it kind of the desire for something different? What is that?
Yeah, I think it's a natural process where you just, if we did, not every record the same, but say we did like 5 records in a row and they were all kind of very, very similar, it would be like working on a production line for me. It would feel like just very pedestrian, and personally, I like to be challenged, but also have something fresh. So I mean, I think the reason we're still going after all this time is that when we approach a record, we approach it as if we're a brand new band and this is our first record, and we have no history and no baggage. Because that really affects your viewpoint then on everything, and it can really jade your writing style. And I think that's the key to me. Just thinking, right, what am I 100% into at this moment in time? Right, let's just go for that. And it can change year in, year out. You don't know how you're going to feel. I mean, the music that you got into when you were maybe 15, 16 always stays with you to some degree, and always keeps coming back. But you can still diversify from that and try different things out to keep it all fresh for yourself.
You're playing in Australia in December. In terms of diversity, what's that show going to look like?
Oh, well, that's an interesting one because we'll have just come off a tour promoting the new record Medusa in Europe, but also on September 1st we're doing an album release show in Germany where we play the Medusa album in its entirety, but then we do a whole other set that's songs picked by the fans. So we're going to have a hell of a lot of material at our disposal, and probably fairly obscure material as well, I guess, if the fans are choosing it. To implement within sets. So I think it's going to be fairly eclectic, really. I think, there'll be probably a fair few songs from Medusa, but because it's the first time we'll have been to Australia for maybe, I think it's 4 or 5 years. I think Soundwave was the last time we were down. I think it's probably going to be a fairly eclectic set, yeah.
A number of your albums have taken kind of a while to people to really get them and kind of understand what's going on with them. How do you feel about some of your more recent albums being, and this is maybe just my perspective, being praised relatively quickly? It feels strange to me because we're not the kind of band that usually has an immediate impact. I mean, even from our second album, Gothic, people sort of refer to it now as being a landmark in that genre. But at the time, my memory of it is very different. We had trouble getting Rough Trade, the distribution company, to release it because it fell between a rock and a hard place. And it wasn't until maybe a year later that people started to pick up on it. And we've had that a lot throughout our career, with the exception of a handful of albums like Draconian Times was a hit on release, if you want. But yeah, it's kind of strange for me having an immediate impact with an album because it's just not, we're not that kind of band. I think this new album Medusa is possibly going to challenge people a bit more again than the last record. I think The Plague Within was a lot more immediate from the off, and I think this one's going to take a little bit more. It's more of a grower, and I kind of like that. I have no problem with that because a lot of my favourite records from my record collection took me a while to get into, but then they stick with you. One last question, sort of combining those two questions in a kind of way. Mm-hmm. You recently released the 20th anniversary edition of 1 Second. Obviously sort of falls in a similar category. Personally, I'm a fan. What I'm curious about is you hear people saying people didn't get it at the time, but what was it like? How did it go down live? When we first played it live, or how does it go down now? Or? How did it first go down live?
It was kind of a lot of people not getting it. I'd say it split the audience in half, pretty much, which is what the album did when it first came out. Really, I mean, we came straight from being like these. I mean, Draconian Times was such a kind of, people really got it as a metal record. It was a right time, right place type record. And then when we totally went off track and did 1 Second, I think a lot of people who came to see us live were expecting more of this style that was on Draconian Times. And it kind of threw a lot of people. And I can understand that. I mean, if people don't like it, they don't like it. But when I listen to some of our back catalogue, regardless of which record it is, I still think you can tell what band it is. Regardless of how the execution is, I still think the songwriting style and the way that the feeling you get from the music, it hasn't diversified that much,
Paradise Lost are releasing their 15th studio album Medusa on the 1st of September. Also touring Australia in December, playing in Melbourne at the Corner Hotel on the 16th. Greg, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome, Ben. My pleasure too.
Thanks for listening to the Moshpit Backstage podcast. You can subscribe to us on iTunes and Omni. To find out more about the show, go to www.syn.org.au/moshpit. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/moshpitonsyn and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at moshpitsyn. The regular Moshpit radio show broadcasts punk, rock and metal tunes and interviews every Thursday nights on Syn 9.7 on FM and digital radios. Listeners outside of Melbourne, Australia can stream Syn 9.7 online at www.syn.org.au. Thanks to Vintage Ruin for the music.
Hi, this is Tomato from Flash Gun Apocalypse.
Hi, I'm Enid from Girls School.
I am Phoebe Pinnock from Heavenly Axe.
Hey, this is Gary Olney of the Misfits.
Hey, this is Kat Sproul from Horizon's Edge, and you're listening to The Mosh Pit on Sin FM.
Hi, this is Einar from Leopard.
Hi, I'm Virginia Lilly from the band Lily.
This is Raul from 1349.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ali from Beaverhead.
Hey, everybody, this is Charlie Benante with Anthrax, and you are listening to The Mosh Pit on Sin.